Is your job search stuck? Maybe you're not getting any interviews with employers. Or maybe you are, but no job offers. Or you may be new and not even know where to start. This is Charles Max Wood, and I'm releasing a new course and ebook on how to find a job as a software developer. The course walks you through the process of finding the types of companies you want to work for, getting their attention, and putting your best foot forward as the candidate they want. I've coached dozens of developers in looking for jobs and have been able to help several people find jobs within 2 weeks to 2 months. So whether you're new to development, can't find a great job that fits what you want, or looking for remote work from an area without a strong tech community, I can help. Go to getacoderjob.com and sign up today. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Elixir Mix. This week on our panel we have Eric Berry.
Hey everybody.
Josh Adams.
Hello.
Mark Ericksen.
Hi.
I'm Charles Max Wood, devchat.tv. Just a quick shout out. If you're looking for, I have people asking for like t-shirts and mugs and stuff. If you want any of that stuff, go to swag.devchat.tv and you can pick up all that stuff and more. But yeah, I got all that up yesterday. So anyway.
Your server's down, by the way, Chuck.
Yeah, I set up the CNAME on the DNS and it doesn't seem to want to work. So
yeah.
By the time this goes live, it'll be up. So anyway, and it's on TeePublic. So if you go to TeePublic and look up CMaxW, which is my handle on there, you can find all the stuff there too. But yeah, we have a special guest this week, and that is Devon Estes. Devon, do you want to
Guten Abend. Yeah, how y'all doing?
Doing all right. Do you want to give us a brief intro since you haven't been on this show before? You've been on Ruby Rogues a couple of times.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Devon. I am a programmer based in Berlin, Germany. I'm American, though. We've lived here in Berlin for the last 3 years. Before that, we were in California. And before that, New York. And I, for a while now, have been focusing mainly on Elixir. I have a Ruby background. But yeah, Elixir is my main language these days and my language of choice.
So you might say you're all in on Elixir.
Yeah, I am. I did write a post a little while ago because as a freelancer, I get inquiries every now and then, and especially most people knew me from the Ruby world, so I still get sort of Ruby inquiries, but I sort of have a rule that if I say something like more than twice, then I should just write a blog post about it, and then I can link someone to the blog post. So I wrote a post sort of explaining that I'm not really taking on new Ruby projects, that I love Elixir, and I don't really have the time in my life to devote to the Ruby stuff anymore. Like I kind of wish I did, but I don't. So I'm picking Elixir because I love it and I want to focus on that in the future.
You know, it's funny because before we spoke, I'm like, I know him. Do I know him from Code Sponsor from before? But I see your name all the time. So I looked at my inbox and I did a search for Devon, the way you spell your name. And I don't imagine there's a lot of Devon spelled Devon. So I did a search and immediately I got an email from October 2017 on the changelog, and Elixir Weekly on March 21st, April 18th, May 30th, July 22nd, August 9th. Like, you're on all of those, which is pretty funny. So, yeah, you're in my head, man.
Well, I try and write a bit. I find it really helpful. I mean, funny enough, I actually have a story about how writing a blog post shortly after this helped us fix a kind of gnarly, persistent bug in Benchy. I just had to go through the process of like writing out what was going on, and eventually just going through the process of writing it helped me really understand where this bug might be. And we ended up fixing it, which is great, with some help from some folks on the Erlang mailing list, of course. But I like to write. I try and write once a month on like what I'm learning, what's cool, what's new in my world, what I've learned in my open source work and in my freelancing work. So I like to write, and that's, I don't know, I guess people like what I'm writing, which is always nice. People get value out of what you're doing.
Absolutely. In fact, back in the day when I had that same mentality, I would write a lot, and I actually attribute a lot of my ongoing learning to to the post that at the time, a lot of what I was learning was because I was writing about it. And whenever you write something, you're like, okay, I can't sound like an idiot. So you got to make sure you cover everything possible and you make sure you know what you're talking about. And it's basically like doing a research paper. You probably put in 5 times the amount of work than people expect that you do on these blog posts because you're researching and you're understanding it. Have you found that your blog has provided introductions that maybe wouldn't have been there otherwise?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think I've indirectly at least had 2 contracts off of stuff that I've written or conferences that I've spoken at, because I don't know, it's funny enough, I used to work in PR and marketing, and there was a saying that the founder of the company I used to work for would say all the time. He said, visibility creates opportunity. It doesn't necessarily give you success, but it gives you opportunity. So, by being a little bit more visible, it gives me more opportunity for more people to maybe reach out and be like, oh yeah, we're looking for a freelancer, and let's see if this might work. So yeah, I've had a lot of people get in touch with me either through reading stuff that I've written or seeing talks that I've given at conferences, or engaging with people on Twitter, stuff like that. That's really certainly helped pay the bills, and also in a big way really helped keep me working mainly in Elixir recently, which is something that was sort of a goal of mine, was moving away from Ruby and moving more into Elixir, which 2 or 3 years ago was still a little tricky. I wouldn't be able to feel comfortable writing off all Ruby work and just saying I'm only going to do Elixir, because there wasn't really enough. The language was still growing, the ecosystem was still growing, and also I didn't have much of a presence in the Elixir community, so I wasn't confident that I could get to work. But now the language is mature and evolved, the ecosystem is mature and evolved. There are tons of companies using Elixir in production these days that need more developers and need more help. So now it's actually a great time to be an Elixir freelancer. You're sort of at the front of the coming gold rush, I think.
No, I could see that for sure. I thought, it's interesting when you choose a technology, sometimes choosing a technology is just as much about how easy it is to find resources to help support that as it is that if it's the right tech. I think Elm is a good example of that, where Elm might be the ideal tech for front-end development. And I know, Josh, you have a strong opinion on that.
A little bit.
But finding Elm developers is really hard in as I understand it. And it's still kind of one of those techs that are under the radar. And I think Elixir has been that way for a while. However, it's not becoming that way anymore. It's actually starting to become the new and improved Ruby, or the new and improved. You still get the 10x productivity, but you're not held up by the global interpreter lock, and you have the full native concurrency built in. I've definitely have seen that. Have you ever had issues finding work in Elixir?
Not in the last year and a half. I've been pretty fully booked for the last year and a half, and that's a good part of your job as a freelancer is looking for work and developing contacts and meeting people, networking and stuff, and like writing and doing stuff like that just to stay visible. But I haven't had much difficulty in finding work. There are definitely, I think, well, this isn't empirical. This is just sort of my anecdotal take on it. But from lurking around in Elixir Slack and talking to other people either interested in the language or working in the language, it seems like there's currently more people looking to work full-time in Elixir than there are full-time Elixir jobs. And they're certainly not evenly distributed. That's another big thing. There are certain cities, it seems like, in certain countries in which Elixir is far more prominent than others. So there are a lot of people looking for remote jobs that, may not be able to find them. I think there's definitely a little bit of a market mismatch in where the jobs are located, because like a lot of people that want, for example, like on-site developers in San Francisco cannot find Elixir developers. I was actually in San Francisco a couple of months ago when I went to their meetup there, and they said like we need more Elixir and Erlang developers, because they actually do their meetup together, Elixir and Erlang together, which I actually think is really great. But everyone there was like, we need to hire. And I was like, well, I know dozens of great Elixir and Erlang developers in France and Poland and South Africa that like you guys could totally hire if you want. And they're like, oh, well, yeah, they need to be in San Francisco. So there's a lot of great developers out there looking for work, and there are a lot of companies looking for developers. It's just they're not really matching up these days, which is a little funny. But luckily, more people are turning remote, and I've been a remote worker for 6 years now. So yeah, it's for the companies that are doing remote, doing Elixir, they're getting some great folks these days, which is great. There's a lot of talent out there, and there's a lot of people looking to work in Elixir full time. I think a lot of people like me have sort of been bitten by the bug.
Devon, I'd love to hear about kind of that transition that brought you from Ruby to Elixir, and like, writing a blog post that is kind of, it's like your stake in the sand, right? So like you're saying, I'm making it public that I'm going to turn away a whole class of work, right? So that's not a small commitment. It's a significant like stake. So I'd love to hear about like, what were the motivations where you felt like, this is the path I want to go down. It's not just about money for me. If there's something else, there's something, I want this path. I'd love to hear about that.
Well, the more I wrote Elixir, I'd say somewhere in like late 2016, it sort of clicked for me that like, this is the way I like to program and the way I like to think in general. After having learned Elixir, I looked back at a lot of the Ruby code that I wrote over the years. I was like, oh, well, this is just all like Ruby inspired Elixir. It's all a very heavily functionally inspired. That was the sort of a niche that I tried to fill in the Ruby world as well. I believed in that style of programming. I love dynamically typed functional languages, and Elixir is a really wonderful dynamically typed functional language. And to me, I just get a feeling of productivity and comprehension. I can work in the language very easily, especially as a freelancer. It's extremely easy for me to come into a project and be productive on day one. I can pick off a little corner of a program, and I don't need to understand the entire architecture and how these 9 classes are related through inheritance. I can just look at a file and look at the functions and look at the type signatures. If people are nice enough to put type signatures on, which are really nice if you drop some specs in there, but I can be really productive really fast, which for me makes clients happy. It makes me happy. And it just sort of fits the way that I think, and it fits the way that I like to write code. And, there are other benefits. There are a lot of other benefits, but for me, if all of the other great things about Elixir and being on the beam, if none of them were there, I would still probably prefer this style of writing code to the object-oriented style or to procedural style. I've played around with Go. I've used that in a couple projects, and I've done Ruby, I've done Python, I've done JavaScript. And the thing that is sort of head and shoulders spoken to me more than any of those paradigms has been Elixir, and been Elixir and like functionally inspired Ruby. But if I'm going to write that kind of code, I might as well do it in Elixir, where that's sort of the quote unquote right way to do it. Whereas when I was doing it in Ruby, that's not necessarily, it is a way in which you can use the language, but it is not the way in which the language was designed to be used. So
yeah, I often got strange looks from my Ruby code once I started writing Elixir as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, it was funny. Like I was writing Ruby code that way before I was writing Elixir. I just sort of naturally gravitated towards that style of writing. And that always appealed to me, that the way in which you can compose things together in small little chunks, and the way, you can see where everything is. And I never liked to lean too heavily on inheritance. I always, just put little things together and compose functionality by essentially slapping together a bunch of lambdas. So, that always made me a little on the quirky side in the Ruby community, but it worked for me. And I was really productive there. And, it was really easy to test my code. There wasn't weird side effects happening everywhere. But yeah, for Elixir, the number one thing for me is that it's a dynamically typed functional language. And that just sort of fits with how I like to write code, how I feel productive, which for me is really important. I like feeling productive. I like feeling like I'm good at what I do. So it fulfills those needs for me in a big way. But then I also feel very confident in the direction and the future of the language. One of the things that I always point out to people when they ask what I love about Elixir is I show them how many open issues there are on language. And there's never more than 30. It is diligently and lovingly curated and maintained. And that cannot be overstated. That is so important to the direction and the future of the language and of the ecosystem, is to have people shepherding the development and the future of the language as it's being taken care of. And I have complete trust in Jose and the whole rest of the core team to make good decisions. And I like the philosophies behind the language. I prefer the explicitness. That's I don't mind typing extra characters. I paid for a fancy keyboard so my hands don't hurt. Like, that's not a problem for me. So I like a lot of those things about the sort of philosophy of the language, the way the language is taken care of, the love and the work that goes into it is so important. And that's another huge part of it, is that and the community is very, very nice. I've had in the last couple of years probably dozens upon dozens of hours of people from the core team helping me with problems, helping us fix bugs at Benchy, helping us implement features, working with them to fix their stuff. We've had a lot of close interaction with the core team and with some of the other contributors there, and it's just been a really wonderful, helpful, inclusive community. And those are really the biggies. The other stuff, frankly, it to me is icing on the cake. I know for so many people, stuff like the 9 nines of availability and the speed and the concurrency primitives are the thing that make Elixir great to them. But there are honestly other languages that have that, Erlang being first and foremost among them. Elixir, to me, is a step above because I believe in the direction of the language, the philosophy of the language, and the community has been built. I think those are all really, really important parts of being part of an ecosystem, is taking those things into account.
See, I obviously love Elixir. I mean, there's no question about this. What do you not love about it?
So funny enough, today, I found my first thing in Elixir that I do not care for. Just today, I was reading some code, and I knew that there was a super callback in def overridable. So if you override a function, if you're implementing a behavior and you override, you can override it and then call the thing that's been overridden. And that is the first thing that I found that I don't love, because I think it sort of violates that explicitness, because then you're calling super and you don't know, you can't, like, usually when I'm working in Vim, I can just use star to see where that's defined. And I can't find where that function is defined anywhere in the file that I'm looking at. And that to me is like a little bit of a bummer. I have to go searching for a file, which is something I had to do all the time previously, something I very rarely have to do these days, to go searching for a file or a function definition. Maybe the tooling will evolve to the point where it's not a problem. But that to me is the first thing that I didn't love. And I think the community needs to get a little better in communicating use cases as well. One of the stuff you need to know, like, for example, when I was in San Francisco, I think it was in July, at their meetup, I was talking with someone who was the VP of engineering in a company using Elixir, and they said that, our like mid-level developers all feel like they aren't using Elixir well because they're not using OTP in their Phoenix applications. It's like, no, they are. It's just all taken care of for them. Like, that's abstracted away. You get all of the OTP benefits. You don't need to care about that stuff because the Phoenix team has done a great job of abstracting over those. And you're getting, every time you get a request in, you're still spawning a new process to handle it. Like, that's all happening. They don't need to do all of these extra fancy schmancy OTP things on top. Maybe they will need to later, but they shouldn't feel like they're not real Elixir developers because they're not like keeping everything in a gen server somewhere. So for the majority of my time in Elixir as a freelancer, frankly, the project that I just came onto late last week is the first time where Elixir is like really the only option, because they have a need for both extremely high availability and extremely high throughput. Most of the other things that I've done could have easily been done in any other language that's Turing complete, could have been done in Rails, could have been done in Django, could have been done in Node, but I just prefer the Elixir. And you can do all of those things just as well in Elixir, if not better. And there's no shame or downside in that. If you're not using releases, if you're not using like OTP besides what's given you in Phoenix, you're not doing it wrong. You're still using Elixir right. Like there's still so many benefits to using the language, even if you're not power using the language. So I think that's on the community side. One thing we could do a little better is sort of embracing the mundane and like the not so special. And, I would love to see a conference talk of like, these are the 4 simplest applications that I wrote with Elixir, and they turned out great. And like, we don't have 2 million users on a single connection, or 2 million connections on a single server. And like, we have maybe six concurrent clients at a time. And, there's no GraphQL API. It's just a REST API, and it's really simple and it works really well, and it makes everybody happy. Like that would be a great story to share. So I think we need some more stories of that kind of usage of the language, and, embracing that a little bit more, I think would be really helpful for both making people a little bit more welcome and also spreading language adoption a little bit more.
How are other languages doing that? Or like what can we actually do now to make that happen?
Well, it's hard. And funny enough, this is something that I've spoken about recently with some of the other folks in a project that I work on called exorcism.io, which is sort of like a code practice platform. I don't know what the new official terminology is, because they've just relaunched a whole new brand. It's actually an awesome new website. It all works so much better now. But some other languages, especially Ruby and JavaScript, I believe they embrace people who are completely new to programming, which is something that positions them uniquely to embrace very simple use cases. Like those people that are completely new to programming aren't going to be coming in and implementing like some Raft implementation. Like that's not going to be their first job. They're not going to be jumping from like working in a completely different career to like working on distributed systems problems and like distributed consensus protocols and like gossip networks. I'm not entirely sure if Elixir wants to go that route, or if we're always just going to be having people where Elixir is their second or third or fourth language, or if they want to target people that have never programmed before and start doing, like boot camp curriculum in Elixir or things like that. It's a little tricky.
I kind of think that will come sort of naturally as the language grows a bit, because there will be more people being onboarded, and they'll kind of, I think, provide kind of the interim content, if you will. Yeah. I mean, we have a good deal of content in the language now, which is nice. But because a lot of the people that came to it early were using it because they needed it. A lot of the first content was stuff like that. It was stuff like Bleacher Report, like we really needed to shave microseconds, or like we really needed to go from like 3 nines to 4 nines of availability. The early adopters were the people that were looking for something like Elixir for years and found it and were like, oh my God, this solves all our problems. And that was a lot of the first use cases. And I think that sort of set the tone for the language early on in its days. And I think you're definitely right, Josh, that we start seeing people that choose just because they like this style of programming, not because they need, super high availability or super high uptime or throughput. They're not going to come to it because it's a faster Ruby. They're just going to come to it because it's a nice language with a good community, with a well-developed ecosystem that you can be productive in and that just works, that you don't have problems maintaining. I actually think one of the best things that we're going to have is, 4 or 5 years down the road when we start seeing the legacy stories of like, we've had this application for 6 years now. It's been Elixir for 6 years, and we're ranking new features just as fast as we were 6 years ago because it's so easy to maintain.
Deploy more, pay less with DigitalOcean, the simplest all-in-one cloud computing platform for developers. Scale and run cloud applications faster and more efficiently with effortless administration tools to robust compute, flexible configurations, networking services, real-time alerts, and rapid provisioning, while enjoying industry-leading price to performance with a flat pricing structure across all global data center regions at any usage volume. Spend more time building better web apps and less time worrying about managing infrastructure with DigitalOcean. Build your next app on DigitalOcean. Get started with a free $100 credit at do.co/elixir.
Well, boring is great. I love boring.
Yeah, it makes a bad story.
It's hard.
Though.
It's hard to tell. Yeah, but it's hard to tell those stories in a non-boring way. But I believe it can be done. I trust that it can be done, and I also think that there will just be enough. The programming is a very chatty community. Programmers talk, and I have a feeling that once enough of those people start having those experiences, that the word will start getting out. So I think that's going to be sort of the next like tagline maybe for the language. People will stop thinking of it as a faster Ruby and start thinking of it as a more maintainable Ruby, maybe, I don't know, or maybe a more maintainable JavaScript. Maybe they jump from JavaScript over, or who knows. But I think the long-term maintenance of applications is going to be one of the sort of major stories in 4 or 5 years. I recently jumped into an application that I hadn't seen, that I wrote 2 years ago, that I hadn't seen in 2 years. And it was as easy to jump into it as if I had like finished writing it 2 weeks ago. It was so easy because of the experience of the language, and because I took the time to leave myself documentation and type specs. It made it nice, but the maintainability and the flexibility of the language, I think, is going to be much easier in the long run, especially with larger systems, and that's going to be a major selling point for the language.
Yeah, along those lines, I really like that probably 95% of the random projects or libraries that I check out have pretty good test suites. And so that makes it much easier to jump into them.
Yeah, for sure.
So Josh, you've had a lot of experience over the years kind of helping push forward the Elixir ecosystem through Elixir Sips. Have you seen a pickup from that? Have you seen it grow, or has it kind of paled off a little bit? And how do you see the involvement? I'm sorry to focus on you, Josh, but how do you see your involvement in all of these different projects that you have driving forward the awareness?
I'm not sure about how much I could say that I drive forward awareness, but I've definitely seen the language growing. Like it tends to double every year in terms of, I run the Elixir user survey, which I'm still really late getting out the results from for last year, since it's almost next year. And it historically doubled every year. This time there were not double as many respondents, but also if you look at like Elixir Conf attendance, it seems to roughly double every year. And obviously that can't go on forever. I think it's probably somewhat going to reach a plateau soon, just because the number of people that will move to go to a conference. But I'd say Elixir Conf, as an example, grew very rapidly, way more rapidly than other. I tend to pay attention to evolving languages, and Elixir's right on up there with the fastest growing in my experience in the last 4 years at least.
So Devon, tell us about the project you have called Fast Elixir.
So that came out of a talk I gave at ElixirConf EU almost like a year and a half ago. So it was 2017, April 2017, where I was talking about some of the stuff that I learned working on Exorcism and like looking at other people's code. And that's one of my favorite things to do on Exorcism, is to look at other people's implementations. They give you all of these little like katas, little toy problems, and you solve it, push it up and get feedback, but you can also see everybody else's implementations. And I was talking about some of the cool Elixir things that I'd learned looking at that. And as I was going through and looking at these different implementations, I was also benchmarking them using Benchy, which is a great benchmarking tool that me and a friend of mine here in Berlin, Toby, work on together. And I found, given these are all the same problem, but some of them are drastically faster than others. And there's a project in Ruby called Fast Ruby, where you basically these are three basically to do a thing, and one of them is like 35 times faster than the other. So, it makes sense to use the one that's 35 times faster. And no such thing existed. And one of my sort of calls to action at the end of my talk was for more people to share their stories, especially of failure. Failure is a great learning experience for everybody. The next talk I'm going to be giving is all about all of the things I did wrong in the last year working on Benchy, pretty much, and everything that I learned from it. it's one of the great things about failure is you learn so much from it. So I had written some not very good Fast Elixir code in my day, and I decided to sort of replicate that fast Ruby, but with Elixir. So, if there are two ways to do something and one of them is way faster, you should know, might be better to pick the faster one, especially in some cases it is enormously faster, like using the cons operator instead of concatenating two lists, especially as the lists get large, it's enormously faster. And then there are some other things that I had always heard people saying, like ETS is super fast, like Erlang term storage. It's super fast. And I was like, well, how fast is it? I always hear people say it's fast, but I don't know how fast it is. So I compared that with the Gen server, and turns out, yeah, it is super fast, at least for retrieving information. I can't say in general, but for a simple data retrieval, Erlang term storage is super fast. So stuff like that. And also, one other thing I'd heard recently is someone on a project said they didn't want to use spawn link because it's slower than spawn. So they were basically saying that they wanted to trade the supervision privileges for speed. And I was like, well, let's see. And it really isn't that much faster to use spawn instead of spawn link. So, having that knowledge can help you write better code, and putting it out there and making it available, hopefully for everyone to share the things that they've learned, can help us all write better, faster Elixir together if we all sort of pool our knowledge and share those idioms and those things that everybody's learned in their work.
So you mentioned your work on Benchy. I didn't know if you wanted to discuss Benchy and what's been done recently and what's coming up. It's interesting what you've learned.
Yeah, so Benchy is a wonderful benchmarking library. The most recent thing that we did, which we're very proud of, is we finally got the measurement of memory consumption for a function down pretty well. There are some tiny caveats to that, which is, it's only within a single process. So if your function spawns like 30 other processes to do some parallel work, we're not going to be able to capture all those other processes. So at this point, we can't capture accurately, we can't capture the memory usage of the whole function on the VM as a whole. So that's a little tricky, but within a single process, we can now accurately capture the memory usage, which was really tricky because you can't turn the garbage collector off on the beam for good reason. Like if you did that, you would almost instantly crash the beam. So you can't do it. They don't let you do it, which makes measuring memory usage kind of tricky, especially in a concurrent environment, because there's always stuff going on. Especially if you are on a multi-core machine, you could be running a function in one process and three other processes are getting some turns and in the scheduler, and they are bumping up the memory allocated to the virtual machine, to the beam, and it has nothing to do with the usage of the process you're looking at. So we eventually found out an implementation of how to do it using a trace listener. So we set up a tracer to listen to garbage collection events. And that gives you, basically, we force the garbage collection as frequently as possible to make sure, like basically we force a garbage collection and then start listening to garbage collection events, then run the function to listen to all of the garbage collection events that happen during the function. And then after it's done, force one more garbage collection and then turn the garbage collection tracer off. And that gives us our memory usage, which is, I think we're the first ones to do that on the beam, to accurately calculate memory usage of a function, which is something I really wanted to do for the nerves folks, because I imagine that memory is a thing they care about, especially if they're using some tiny little device somewhere that has like 4 meg of memory or something. I don't know, maybe some of these things have more than 4 megs of memory, but I'd imagine memory usage is a thing that they care about significantly. So being able to benchmark that and optimize their code for what's important to them, I thought was really important. And then another thing, after we're getting close to 1.0, which is awesome, maybe another week or two to update some formatters and then push out a deprecation release, and then we can get 1.0 out. But after 1.0 comes out, I really want to do a reduction counting benchmark, which I think we can use for like properly accurate performance testing. Because right now, for most performance testing, you have to do it on wall time, which is like exceedingly unreliable. It depends on, what machine you're running on, how busy the machine is, all of that stuff. But reduction counting for a certain function, again, within a single process, should be consistent across platforms. So instead of, most performance tests that I've seen now have these like such wildly high margins of errors that they're almost not functional. they'll say like, don't get 50% slower, which is like, oh, great. But with reduction counting, I think we can narrow that margin of error down pretty significantly. There will be some differences between platforms, especially between 32 and 64-bit machines, but you can pretty narrowly and pretty tightly keep a look on your performance for like really, really hot paths in your code to make sure that you're not, as you go down, you're not slowing down your app incrementally by accident. So that's something I would love to see after 1.0. That'll hopefully be the 1.1 release, which I don't know, maybe Christmas. Who knows when we'll have time to get around to it. But it actually shouldn't be that hard, which is the other great thing. All of that stuff is made so easily available to you, and it's going to be almost the exact same implementation that we have for memory. So it won't be that hard to add once we get 1.0 out. But yeah, we're getting close to that. It's a wonderful project, and we've seen it really take off in the last year, especially. I think Ben and Jose used it in their Adopting Elixir book, and that it seems like right after that book came out, the Benchy downloads like skyrocketed. So, and I know a few of the other core team members use Benchy a lot in their work, both on Elixir itself and on their other projects. So it's getting some great usage, and we love working on it. Toby's an awesome guy to work with, and if anybody wants to contribute, we have open issues, but yeah, it's a wonderful project. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned so much working on it too. It's been really great.
So you mentioned that you were using that trace to do the garbage collection thing, and I see that you have a more recent blog article that covers that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to drop that in the notes so people can find that too. So you also mentioned the looking at reductions as a way of doing more accurate performance testing and getting insight. Could you just help explain what reductions are in the Beam so that people can kind of get a better understanding of that?
Yeah. So a reduction is, you can think of it as like one reduction is one thing that the virtual machine does. And every time it does a thing, it has a little counter that it increments. This is like, okay, I did one thing, two things, and three things. And it does a certain number of things before it needs to take a little break, and the scheduler has done enough things. I'm giving time to somebody else, and they're going to do a certain number of things, and then I'm going to go to the next person in my queue, and that's how the Beam internal scheduler manages CPU resources allocation, is by counting reductions. And that's like the most basic unit of computation in the Beam. One reduction, I don't know if it maps directly to one Beam instruction. That's one of the things I'm actually kind of excited to learn about when I do get to implementing that, is learning more about how instructions are, or the reductions are implemented, and how those map to the code that we're writing. Like in implementing that feature, I know I'm going to learn so much about that little part of the Beam. But my understanding is that it's one reduction is one basically instruction. I don't know if it's a CPU instruction or a Beam instruction, but it's one instruction, and it counts that, and that's how it manages its internal scheduler, is by reduction counting. So each process gets a certain number of reductions, and then the next one, and then it switches back and forth, and that's how it can keep its soft real-time properties, is by basically saying, some number of reductions, and then you take a little break, and then the next guy goes for some number of reductions, and so on.
One thing that I was curious about was, when you adopted Ruby, did you feel the same way about it that you do now about Elixir? Because I don't know. I've heard a lot of people talk about Elixir the way you talked about Elixir, and I've heard a lot of people talk about Ruby in the past the way that you talked about Elixir. And with the all-in blog post, and I totally get it. I'm not, I'm actually working on a project right now that I'm going to be using Phoenix and Vue on. And I'm just, for me, it's more just a learning opportunity. But yeah, I guess I'm curious, is this, you just kind of found the next best thing? Or is it, what was your experience when you adopted Ruby, and how does that compare to when you adopted Elixir?
So my first sort of modern programming language, I started programming when I was a kid, took 10 years off to go be an opera singer, which is like a totally different story. And then when I got back into computers, my first sort of modern programming language was Python. And this was 6 or 7 years ago. And Python was fine. I was enjoying writing code again, and it was great, but there wasn't a ton of resources for people learning, especially people that didn't have CS degrees. And the community wasn't as vibrant or helpful. And then somebody said, oh, well, maybe you might enjoy this Ruby community. And like, boy, did that community have a lot to offer to people wanting to learn how to code, and especially people that didn't have CS degrees. And the community is really what drew me into Ruby more than anything. They had so many resources. They had so many nice people. It was just a wonderful environment for people who really wanted to go bananas, learning as much as they could. And there was so much out there and so many helpful people, and the community infrastructure was so well developed. And that's what really got me into Ruby really hard, was the people and the community. And I was fine at Ruby, but like I said, as I started becoming, not so much a beginner and started becoming an intermediate, to advanced Ruby developer, my style of writing Ruby started sort of deviating. Like what I liked started deviating from the norm. And I found other great communities in Ruby as well. I found, frameworks like Hanami and Rom and that more sort of functionally inspired Ruby, which I think is still a really important part of that community. But looking back on it now, the language wasn't the thing that sold me the most. It was the community. With Elixir, the language fits me and the way I like to write code in a way that Ruby did not, or at least the sort of archetypical way that people write Ruby did not fit me. And I tried other languages. I feel like everybody has to know at least a little bit of JavaScript. And I went through a period where I really tried to love JavaScript, and it just didn't fit with me. Even though I knew tons of nice people and it was a nice community, the language didn't appeal to me. And I mentioned that I tried Go, and like that community turned me off pretty quick. I was out of there. I didn't last very long in Go world because I asked someone why they didn't have a package manager, and then they told me because you should be able to write everything you need yourself. I said, well, I don't have a CS degree, so I don't think that's going to fit. Because I don't know crypto, and I'm not a security expert, so I don't think that's going to work too well. And then I found Elixir and I played around, and the language itself just fit the way I think about code so well, to the point where I don't know, it's sort of unfair to say the language, but the paradigm. So a dynamically typed functional language fit the way that I like to work so well, and that I just, it doesn't feel unnatural for me. It doesn't feel like I need to find a way to write the code I want to write in the way I want to write it. It seems like the way I want to write the code and the way it's supposed to be written is the same in this case. And, it could be that if I learned Clojure instead of Elixir, that I could have had the same experience. I don't know. I can't go back in time. And frankly, I'm invested in Elixir now. I'm not going to go to Clojure. But I don't know, that it could have been the case that I could have fallen just as deeply in love with Clojure as I did with Elixir. I can't say for sure, but this paradigm of writing code just works so well for me. And all of the other things are awesome too. But like I said, that's the icing on the cake. The availability, the concurrency, all that stuff is wonderful. And for a good deal of applications, it's crucial. You need that desperately. But for an even greater deal of applications, you don't need that stuff. You could use Ruby, and frankly, when people say Phoenix is a faster Rails, the speed on the back end is not what affects your users 90% of the time. It's missing database indexes and N+1 queries and sending way too much JavaScript over the wire. So you could use Ruby and be fine on speed. You can use Elixir and be fine on speed. That's not why I'm using it. I'm using it because I like the paradigm. I like how it fits my brain, how I think about code. Just sort of it's a round peg in a round hole, and it feels nice to write Elixir. And I do know a lot of people that have written Ruby for 10, 12 years at this point and still feel the way about Ruby that I hope I will feel about Elixir in another 8, 9 years. But yeah, it just seems to work for me, which is lovely. And, I don't want to slag off Ruby. Ruby's still a wonderful language and a wonderful community. And they've actually done incredible things for programming as a whole in driving, welcoming newcomers, being a very welcoming community. I feel like the community of Elixir is taken part and parcel from Ruby, which is crucial, actually. Like I said, that I think is one of the most important parts of Elixir is the community that's developed. And a lot of the community norms and standards have come directly from Ruby, which is wonderful. But yeah, getting into Ruby was the community that got me there, and the community that made me feel welcome and gave me all the resources I need to learn. And that's, when you have all of that, it's really hard not to love a language when the people behind it and evangelizing it are so nice and funny and helpful. So that was a huge part of Ruby, especially in the beginning of me really enjoying that time.
That makes sense. It's just interesting to see how people evolve and what gets them, in a particular area. And so that's kind of what I was interested in was, basically that progression that you described was, okay, what was it? How did that connect? And it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
We're kind of at the end of our time. Was there anything else that we needed to jump on before we get to picks? All right, let's do picks. Hi, this is Charles Max Wood, and I've been asked more times than I can count, how do I stay current? There's a lot to this question, and I'm working on a solution. Code badges. That's right. You heard me right. Basically, the idea is that you come and do a code badge, and that gets you an introduction to a topic. Then you can decide if you want to pursue it further. But while working on the badge, you gain enough proficiency to be able to pick it up again if you need. A lot of technology comes through on the bleeding edge, and not all of it sticks, but the principles do. So doing badges on the technologies that will get you ahead will provide you with experience needed to stay competitive. Plus, it offers social proof that you know something about the topic. The project is on Kickstarter right now. You can support it and get on the launch list at codebadge.org. Mark, do you have some picks for us?
I do. All right. This one is super geeky. Okay. Yesterday, a friend shared with me this video. You can put it on, it's on YouTube. I'm going to put it it'll be in the notes. It is Erlang the movie. And it's like I kind of had to take pauses while I was watching this because it was like, so I don't know, to take it in small bites because it was so dry and horrible and funny at the same time. So what it is it's a video made in the Ericksen labs. So Ericksen was like, that's where Erlang was developed. And you have the creators like Joe Armstrong is in here and a lot of the other guys. And they're showing how Erlang solves problems and specifically in the telephony systems. And that's where it was born, right? This is like, you're seeing like a snapshot in time when it was born. But the delivery is so dry. It is so funny and not meaning to be funny, but I just kept cracking up. So that's one. And then another one is I had a friend come over and visit in my house, and I'd been playing with a retro gaming on a Raspberry Pi. And I pull out my, running some emulators, and we pull out some joysticks, and we sit down and we're playing some old, like original Nintendo NES system stuff, and just having a blast, playing these games that I've, haven't touched in years. And so I was just going to give a little shout out to you can buy the official Nintendo NES Classic. It didn't have some of the games that were most important to me though. So I had to be able to get some on my own. But just retro gaming. It's fun. Play it with a friend. Just a little blast from the past. Those are my two.
Awesome. Eric, what are your picks?
Yeah, I think I'll just share one today. And so as developers, we tend to get a little bit obsessive about work and really, really lose ourselves sometimes in the process. And one of those things that I like to do when I want to unwind is to play with Legos. So I bought these Lego kits. They're Todd McFarlane Lego kits. And if you know Todd McFarlane, he's the creator and illustrator behind what is it?
Spawn, isn't it?
Spawn. Yes, Spawn. Thank you. So he has a store online, and you can buy these on Amazon as well. But they're these South Park Lego kits where you can just create your own little scenes from South Park, and they're pretty freaking awesome. I mean, that's a lot of fun to put together, and at the end of the day, you can just stick it on your shelf and look at it. I love it. And while I'm talking about that, I might as well share one more passion that I have, which is Funko Pop little toys. The Funko Pop for the ones I have are Bob's Burgers. So, yeah, there you go. I'm just a whole bunch of toys on my shelf.
Awesome. Josh, what are your picks?
Okay, so I have to follow up Mark's pick for Erlang the movie. So Erlang Solutions gave out at Erlang Factory, and I think the Erlang user group is where they gave most of them out. They made posters. They call them Erlang the movie posters, but they're for various posters. I posted a link of kind of a Harry Potter themed one, and they're hilarious. I actually badgered someone I know and got copies of all of them, so I have them framed. They're hilarious and amazing. So if you haven't seen them, you should scour the internet and find them all because they're all really funny and they've all got like Joe's picture or Joe's face. And anyway, also Martin Gausby has a MQTT client for Elixir called Tortoise. And he recently tweeted that somebody mentioning an open source project can really help it out. So I figured I'd do that because he's an awesome guy. And I have some uses for MQTT, but not right now. So that's it for me.
Awesome. I'm going to do a pick along the lines of Eric's picks. I've been fussing with my camera. It hasn't been working, but it looks like it's working now. So I don't know if you all can see behind me, but I have a shelf full of stuff as well. I get a box every month called Loot Crate, and it's got all kinds of fun stuff in it, and it's really fun to open. I've been planning on actually starting to open those on my YouTube channel. So if you're interested in that, you can go check it out. I don't have any of those opening up videos out there yet, but I have, I think, 2 boxes sitting here in my office because my office turned into a mess and they just kind of got put in one of the piles. And now that I've cleaned things up, I found them. So yeah, I'll probably just wind up setting up a camera and opening them up on YouTube so you can have a look at that. But anyway, they've got stuff from all kinds of fun places. So I'm going to pick that. And then I have taken to listening to books lately, audiobooks. And I've done this off and on. Over the last little while, I tend to go on a tear where I listen to a whole bunch of audiobooks, and I'll go on another tear where I listen to a whole bunch of podcasts. Right now I'm doing audiobooks, and the book that I listened to this week is The One Thing, and it just kind of helps you focus on that thing that's going to make the difference, help make it so you don't have to do certain things or that you are going to get ahead or reach your goals and things like that. So anyway, really, really enjoying that book. So definitely check it out. I don't know who the author is offhand. I guess I can open this up. Let's see. It's Gary Keller with Jay Papasan. So anyway, great book. And I have about an hour left on it. So anyway, Devon, what are your picks?
Cool. So the first one I mentioned, I just came on to a new client recently, and I tried a new time tracking tool called Toggle, Toggl. So far, it's been great. It generates nice reports. It's free for solo freelancers. So that's been working really well for me. So I figure I'll share that. The next one is I recently worked on a project that dealt with some state machines. And in doing that, I went back and reread a little bit of one of my favorite books about computers called Understanding Computation by Tom Stewart, where he basically goes over like the fundamentals of what computation is on like Turing machines and state machines and the lambda calculus and all that stuff. All the examples are in Ruby, so it's really easy for most people to understand. And it's a really wonderful book that does a just excellent job of explaining those basics of computation. I found it interesting and helpful, which is like a rare combination in a tech book. Usually they're just helpful, but this one was both like really engaging and really helpful. So I love that book and I want to pick that one. And then my non sort of work pick is a movie. I love movies. And this is a movie that I saw several months ago, but I still like think about once a week. It stuck with me that long, called The Handmaiden by Park Chan-wook. It's a film in both Korean and English. It is just like mind-blowingly good. All his movies are great. I love many of his movies, but I was literally like screaming at the screen at one point, like, no, like I was so invested in this movie and the characters. It's so beautifully shot and the performances are great. A little bit of warning, like it is extremely sexual. There's a lot of nudity that is an important part of the film, but it is just brilliantly done if you don't have a problem with that kind of thing. Some people do. And it's a little hard to find, but it's on Amazon Prime now. So if you have Amazon Prime, you can stream it on Amazon. It like you couldn't get it in America for the first year after it came out, I think. But wonderful, wonderful movie.
All right, good deal. Well, thanks for coming, Devon. I think we've linked to just about everything in your blog about it 8 times. So I think people should be able to find you online. But yeah, thanks for coming. And we'll wrap this one up and we'll catch everyone next week. Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.